Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you so much for joining us today for the next installment of our Women in AI webinar series. My name is Victoria Papalian. I am the Chief Operating Officer of Udacity, and I'm thrilled to be here today with Saumya Jain. Saumya is the head of product at Workera, the #1 trusted skills technology platform among the Fortune 1000. Saumya has over 15 years of experience in B2B SaaS, HR tech, ed tech, and she holds an MBA from the Wharton School with a triple major in strategy, business, analytics, and entrepreneurship, has a bachelor's and a master's degree in biochemical engineering from the Indian Institute of Technology, Delhi. She started her career as the sole founder of a K-12 school in India with the mission to democratize education for first-generation schoolgoers through a data-driven program. Saumya, thank you so much for being here today and joining us for this series.
Thank you so much, Victoria. Thank you for having me.
So let's start with your personal journey. Can you share the story of how you ended up in the field of AI and what initially sparked your interest in this career?
Yeah, gosh, it goes way back. It actually, I have to go back to the beginning of my career. And my journey into AI really started when I founded a K-12 school, which you just mentioned. And the problem that we're trying to solve there was that students were falling behind. So imagine a kid who's like age appropriate for grade 5, but their reading skills and their math skills are maybe grade 2 and 3. And putting them in an age appropriate classroom just exacerbates the problem. And I quickly realized that those methods of putting them through grade 2 and grade 3 meant that they would always be behind. And so we needed a new approach to identifying each student's unique learning gaps and moving them step by step in the most efficient way we could. And so what we actually did was we used diagnostics to pinpoint where each child needed support. And then we paired them with mentors to guide them and close those gaps. So we were able to cover 2 to 3 years of skill gaps within 6 months to a year, and then put them in the age-appropriate classrooms. And this process was manual, it was labor-intensive. We did have diagnostic tests, but the process of closing skill gaps required a lot of one-on-one tutoring, mentoring. And I thought, what if this could be automated? How could we scale this so that every learner could have a personalized mentor powered by data? And so that really sparked my interest in technology and eventually AI. And at that point, I said, okay, I've been running this brick and mortar school. It's taken me 8 years to get to 600 students, but I had ambitions of scaling that, one thing that I created. So that's when I came to the US to pursue ed tech. And I joined Pluralsight, and that's where we developed the Skill IQ. And at Workera, I'm continuing that mission. So really using AI to verify skills, identify gaps, and provide one-on-one AI mentorship at scale. So I'm really happy about what we're doing. We're really helping organizations and individuals close their gaps faster and more effectively. And throughout my career, I think this is the one thread, helping people reach their potential that makes me feel like it's worth doing what I'm doing. And right now, I do feel like I'm where I'm meant to be.
That's great. I was going to say, before you said it, I was going to say, I totally see the thread between what you started out doing and then how that's evolved into working at Workera with the sort of mentorship and doing things at scale. So the thread totally makes sense. Based on what you just said, you've worked on some high impact projects using technology for good. What has been the most rewarding aspect of working in AI for you?
Yeah, I think it's the ability to make a global impact and make things accessible to the masses that were only available to people who had a large amount of resources. And we say, hey, AI is something that can help personalize solutions. But when I look at it from my lens, having started a brick and mortar K-12 school, spent 8 years on it, it was the pace of growth was very slow and excruciating. With AI, what we've built at Workera, everyone can have their own personal mentor. And so helping people unlock their potential, like there's nothing to me that's more rewarding than that. And AI helps us do that at a much larger scale in a much more personalized way. So I think that's, to me, the most rewarding aspect of working in AI is the specific application of AI that I'm working on.
Yeah, that's incredibly powerful. And for those of us working in and around the online education space, it's sometimes called sort of an antithesis to a traditional education system. Sometimes it's complementary. Sometimes it's something for later on once you exit the traditional system. You are a participant in the traditional education system. You attended, you have several degrees, one of which is an MBA from the Wharton School. How do you feel like your experience at Wharton in the business school specifically prepared you for your role today at Workera as head of product?
Yeah, great question. And I would think about breaking that out into two parts, just for our audience, sharing a little bit of what Workera does and what my current position looks like. And then I'll try to connect what pieces at Wharton specifically I use every day and help me prepare. Workera is essentially a skills intelligence platform that, in the first step, tells organizations and individuals what skills they should have to achieve a certain set of goals. For example, there's a project that there's a new AI project that somebody, a tech leader wants to execute on. What are the underlying skills you'll need? For example, a person who wants to grow into their next level or their next role, what skills do they need? And then the assessments help identify gaps, in very granular gaps. So think of machine learning as a domain or a subject area. We've got 30 to 50 granular skills underlying that. And what that unlocks is when you know within machine learning, what are the 15 gaps that you have out of 50 total skills, we can then offer personalized mentoring that focuses only on those 15 skills. You no longer have to go and take a full 20-hour course where, 5 hours of that was helpful. And so we can then work with our partners, our content providers, to really point people to the right places. And that's powerful. That helps L&D and HR really maximize the value of the tech stack they've already invested in, right? And it creates a win-win for users, for L&D leaders, for admins, and for the entire organizations. When I think back to my time at Wharton, there were a few things that I found really valuable, especially when I look back now. One was my focus on machine learning and AI. So I majored in business analytics, and a big part of that was taking, learning basic tech skills around predictive analytics, traditional machine learning models, what's happening with the latest neural net models, and then really trying to understand what's feasible with AI in my current role. That having those tech foundations was really helpful to understand now when I'm leading AI products on what's possible and what's not. Meeting like-minded people and pushing the boundaries of AI through class projects, hackathons, there's a different energy when you meet the right people, at a place like Wharton, which ends up continuously broadening your horizons, which is an important skill to have to stay relevant in a field like AI, which is changing so quickly. And there's so many things being talked about. When I take a step back, I actually feel like every time I changed careers, having a little bit of time to actually get up to speed with what's going on and not having a full-time job, that period is so valuable. And with an MBA, I got 2 years of that period. I've never gotten that long of a period again, but I still like to take these little breaks between jobs and do a little mini MBA, if you will, to get up to speed on what's going on.
Yeah, that makes total sense. There things are changing every second. So to have that time carved out to dedicate to staying up to date is really important. Um, so speaking of AI and what's important and what's evolving in the world of AI, in the current dialogue, the current conversation, what do you feel like is being talked about too much, or there's too much emphasis put on it? And then what do you feel like is being talked about too little when it comes to artificial intelligence?
Yeah. I love the framing of that question. I have a couple of examples here. Um, what's being talked about too often right now is AI replacing jobs. There's a lot of talk about that, but I think ultimately focusing on job displacement ignores the very critical question of how roles will evolve with AI. You know, how a sales rep's job, for example, will shift on what they do and what they use AI for, and how AI will actually create new roles that don't exist yet. The entire field of LLM ops, for example, is, you know, being created this second across industries. What's being talked about too little, just to contrast this, is the human AI collaboration. So how AI can enhance human roles. For example, in healthcare right now, AI is augmenting so much of human decision making. Doctors are using AI to really automate a lot of the thinking, and within triaging, a lot of the low value tasks are being automated so people can focus on strategic work. Another thing I think about is being talked about too often and too little. On too often, AI-driven innovation, how AI can revolutionize every industry, AI can do everything. There's a lot of this in our feeds right now. But I think one thing that we have to remember as innovators in the field is that it's not just about the tech. It's about the real problems that can be solved using AI, solved better than traditional software using AI. That's the stuff that we're talking too little about. What are the problems that are suited to be solved with AI? And what are the problems where we don't need to force fit AI as a tech and a solution? And one last thing I think, which makes all of this real, is that when organizations and leaders think about what are the tangible skills that the broader population needs to understand all of these nuances and not take all these clickbaity things that are posted every day at face value, it begs the question of how can we help leaders and organizations get a few layers deeper into what is it that AI can help support and what is it that it's not good for. In the new AI-driven world, I think it's also a little bit contradictory that it's no longer just about tech skills. It's about having that human judgment and that ability to discern and also co-create with AI tools. So I think there's a lot that learning and development teams can do to address all of these gaps and challenges that exist today.
Yeah, no, I love that. It's not one skill set. It's the combination of many skill sets. And to your point on people too, it's not just the technology work that needs to understand what's going on. It's every function. At Udacity specifically, we still build training for tech professions, for tech skills, but what that's meant has totally evolved over time. I mean, now we have, for example, we have a digital marketing program because people doing digital marketing need to understand what's happening in AI. Like, it's relevant to every role. So your point is well taken. It's affecting everyone, and it's definitely not displacing. I totally agree with you on that point. We just need to embrace it. Like every function just needs to embrace it. So if then you extrapolate from the individual and the individual skill set, and you broaden that to the organization at large, how do you think organizations can begin to deploy AI-driven products in a responsible manner and at scale?
Yeah. There's so much to that question, and there's a lot that has been said about that. But at its core, if I try to simplify, I think it comes down to empowering people to use AI within bounds, right? So I talked about two things here. I mentioned within bounds and then empowering people. Establishing the bounds and the guidance on that comes from the top. And it's really critical because I've seen firsthand where, when there aren't very clear frameworks from the leadership on what's the responsible way to use AI, what's okay to put in, what's not okay to put in across different tools, it can really result in fragmented and inconsistent use of AI across different departments and can lead to a lot of lost productivity, conversations around, is this okay to do, not okay to do? The reason why a lot of times this is missing is because leaders don't know where to start, and my thought there is, if that's the case, bring in external experts. No one's expected to become like an AI expert, on the leadership team overnight. Can bring in external expert legal advisors to outline what's your commitment as an organization to AI. And the key shift here is that leadership, I think, needs to be both the educators as well as facilitators of a responsible AI culture, and starts at the top. The second part of my initial statement was empowering people. And I think sometimes we think empowering is having access to the tools, and that's table stakes. Yes, organizations need to provide access to AI tools. But one thing that's much more important here is prioritizing explainability. AI is powerful when there's a human that can actually judge the output quality and discern what an AI is producing is good or not. And a lot of times the tools may not have the explainability needed. That's where I think having tools or choosing vendors where the human that's actually working with the AI tool can interrogate how AI actually arrived at a decision is really key. We don't want people to use the AI output at face value and not think and not be able to get into identifying biases or limitations, right? And without explainability, it's nearly impossible to do. Like, how did you arrive from what I gave you in a prompt to this answer? Explain your reasoning to me. And there are studies that show that when you ask an AI to provide reasoning, it actually does better at the task itself because it can think step by step. I think in addition to explainability, another aspect of empowering people is also at some level allowing user overrides to give control to humans. So use AI as you will, but humans have the judgment and the discerning power that AI doesn't have. And so it's really important in high stakes areas like healthcare and finance that if organizations are using AI tools, ultimately, there needs to be overrides in place. So yeah, those are a few of the things. And I think all of it then ultimately comes down to, people having the right skills and knowing what AI is good for and what it's not good for.
Yeah. I mean, what you've just described has so many human touch points, right? From the ethical components to the training components to the judgment of the outcome. So the human is very much in the loop in the entire end-to-end deployment process of AI products. So the human needs to be equipped to be able to address those different touch points. So I mean, in a word, that is called a skill set, I would say. So shifting into skills, what in today's AI world, what skills are in and what's out?
Yeah, this is a hot topic right now. I'll try to answer this rapid fire style just to make it interesting. What's in? skills that help anyone leverage AI, and skills that cannot be replaced by AI. Those are two broad buckets. Skills that can help people leverage AI, so human AI collaboration skills like prompt engineering, critical thinking, knowing when to override AI outputs. Think about Gen AI tools as very fast interns. That's a helpful framework that I use. You need to give them, tell them exactly what they need to do, give them all the context, and they'll get it done for you. But if you're missing some of that, it's going to be hard. Skills that are irreplaceable by AI, those are also in and are getting, their importance is increasing because that's where humans excel. I would say power skills, right? Empathy, communication, creative thinking. We really need to, as organizations, really rethink our training programs so that we're augmenting AI skills with human capacity for empathy, communication. And the third thing I would say is creative problem-solving skills. So an example is Figma has a bunch of AI-powered plugins that product designers can use to generate layouts, but human creativity is still needed, to really identify the best designs, iterate on the best ideas. So I think those are things that are in. Skills that are out, I would say skills related to repetitive tasks in predictable environments that AI can actually do faster. Now, these could include things like manual data processing, basic tech skills like entry-level coding, won't get you very far. If you can think about how you solve problems, systems thinking, those are the things that set you apart. Think about narrow specializations that could be automated, like basic radiology tasks like identifying straightforward fractures. All of those are getting automated by tools like AI Doc. And then even like we often think AI is all software and tech, but if you think of physical labor in predictable environments like an Amazon warehouse, workers no longer perform a lot of the sorting or packaging tasks. It's done by Amazon's Kiva system. So there's automation all around. And the first thing that automation touches is repetitive tasks in predictable environments that you can set guardrails around and have an AI do.
Yeah, that's a really helpful framework for thinking about what skills to acquire if you want to have and build a career in AI. You've talked about the things that humans do uniquely well. You've talked about the things that an AI can do uniquely well. How do you, when interacting with these systems, how do you balance technical skills with creative thinking?
Yeah. That is a question that we grapple with every day as we build AI products, right? Do we need more technical skills related to AI? Where do creative skills, creative thinking fit in? Especially as we start to think about problems that we want to solve with products, with software products. So I want to hone in on that particular scenario where, we're creating AI products. Now, an imbalance across those two skills on a team. So if you think like technical skills, technical feasibility versus creative vision in a, product scoping, an imbalance across those two is highly, highly problematic. And you might have seen this firsthand, Victoria. A team that, is very creative and visionary might end up choosing a direction that tech cannot deliver because they don't have the tech skills to understand what's feasible and what's not. Or a tech-first team might actually gloss over solving a real customer need. So they create great tech and then they're looking for, solutions or problems to solve with that tech or with that solution. There's one thing that I try to do in my teams is to foster early collaboration between people who have the creative skills and people who have the technical skills. It's really hard for one person to have both. And that's why you need product, engineering, design to be doing the work together. And having these like cross-functional kickoffs early in the planning cycles is really important. But then comes the other problem is like creative teams and tech teams, they speak completely different languages, and sometimes they're speaking past each other. And so I almost force my teams to use as much jargon-free language, visual aids, put a lot of pictures and like drawings, back marker sketches in your writing so that it's easy for people to understand. And then you need to have certain, what I call translators on your team that can actually translate tech skills and creative skills, creative thinking across different team members. So the ultimate goal being, everyone stays focused on the customer value. So yeah, those are some things that I try to do, but it's a problem that keeps cropping up again. I feel like it's a problem that cannot be solved. It's something that can be managed on your teams, and like every team is different. So yeah, the solution looks different too.
Yes, that's totally true. Every company is different, has a different flavor, and every team is different. So yes, I'm sure a version of that conundrum exists everywhere. So you've talked now about how I'm going to put words in your mouth, but that you achieve better outcomes when you have different perspectives, different teams, functional areas coming together to achieve a shared goal.
Yes.
A word for that is diversity. Having a diverse set of perspectives, of backgrounds, of experiences, all coming together to build something. This is the role of diversity within the field of AI specifically is incredibly important, and I think becoming increasingly important every day. What do you see as the role of diversity in the development of AI technologies?
Yeah. That is a fantastic question, something that isn't talked about enough. So I'm really glad that you're bringing this question to this forum. In my mind, when it comes to developing AI technologies, I think diversity isn't just about representation. It's actually something that you need to make your AI solutions more accurate, more relevant, and less biased. I truly believe that if you look at teams that are more diverse, they can actually identify blind spots in AI systems better. Right? They can identify biases better. And all of this directly impacts business outcomes. I'll share an example with you. At Workera, we saw that there are a little bit of a different set of preferences for learning styles across different regions. So certain regions prefer more interactive content. The users want to control their learning, whereas other regions favor, more in-depth structured learning paths. And we have a team that spans 25 countries. So very, very diverse, very cross-functional, very, geographically distributed team. And some teams actually surface this. They're like, we heard from certain teams that, hey, we're trying to go too far on one direction or the other, and people have different preferences. And so we ended up actually creating customizable learning solutions where users can actually switch between interactive learning modules or more structured learning modes. And I believe if we had everyone just here in the US, we wouldn't have probably uncovered that opportunity. So I think creating global products that you want should work for everyone in your target, customer segments. You need teams that can closely reflect that demographic as much as possible. Fundamentally, the second thing is I also feel like if you're trying to innovate, you'll have better brainstorming the more diverse your teams are. Because people, when they come from different angles, and I don't mean diversity just in terms of geography or like ethnicity, but even bringing people from different backgrounds or non-traditional backgrounds, they'll lend a very different flavor to your problem solving and brainstorming. And I see that firsthand at Workera. One really interesting example that we came across at Workera was we actually ask our users to self-rate themselves on a particular skill, like before taking a machine learning assessment, we ask them to rate themselves. And we noticed that women consistently rate themselves lower before an assessment, and their scores are actually higher consistently, like across the board. And this is a very important self-limiting bias, because depending on how a user rates themselves, the adaptive test starts at that level and then moves up and down depending on how they respond.
Yep.
And so this could be a self-limiting bias, right? Because if women users are starting lower on the adaptive test, they might be getting lower scores. So we actually corrected this. We have this banner now on the self-rating page where we say, women consistently rate themselves lower. So think about what you're going to rate yourself on. And this is like one small way in which like we could surface this, because we have women engineers and we have women who care about this stuff and cared enough to bring this data point to the forefront that, hey, we're noticing this. There are so many examples that keep reaffirming my belief that, diverse teams are just, they're not just a nice to have. They're really a competitive advantage, especially in AI.
Yeah, I love that it's not only informing your product development, but you're actually calling out the bias to deter people from continuing to perpetuate and contribute to it. So I love that as a product solution. That's great. Have you experienced this yourself as a woman in the world of AI?
Yeah.
Have you experienced anything like this? And can you share sort of how your unique perspective has contributed to a project's success?
Yeah. There's a lot of different instances, but the one that comes to mind is a project that I was working on in my previous company. And the idea was to develop an AI feature that helped improve manager-employee interactions. So, every manager-employee pairs have one-on-ones, hopefully every week, right, to stay connected on how the employee is doing. And the problem that we're trying to solve was, a lot of times these conversations become very dry, mechanical, and not really useful for both sides. We said, how can we use AI to recommend conversation starters, right? To make these conversations a little bit more meaningful. Now, the challenge here was, if you look at existing conversations and the background of what's happened between a manager and employee, a lot of these conversations are focused on projects, current tasks, roadblocks, performance-related things, right? And overall, I believe there is, not a lot of focus on emotional well-being, other leadership aspects that are especially important to support the whole employee, right? And specifically when you think of women and other underrepresented groups in the workplace. I felt this from firsthand experiences and my personal experiences. During COVID is when I had my first child, and then I had to return back to work, right? And that period was also unusual in the sense that I had very little support from family and from friends, because we were all under, lockdown, and like we were all scared, what's going to happen to the baby? Should the baby be meeting too many people or not? So all of this meant like so much struggle in terms of managing both work and home, right? And I had wished that, I had more support at work. Even my manager, like asking about, how am I doing, right? How can things be set up in a way that I feel more supported? That would have impacted my motivation and my drive to work so much more than anything else. And so I feel like that experience as a woman really gave me a unique insight. I wanted to explore that further. And so what we ended up doing was having some conversations and focus groups where we learned that employees often feel disengaged because In one-on-ones, there's just, shop talk, very heavy focus on tasks and like how much progress is being made, where do you see the risks, what are the roadblocks. Ultimately, we bring our whole self to work. At least that's what that's what the goal or the aim should be, especially in like remote settings where we actually don't meet a lot of people outside of Zoom calls. The least we can do is make those one-on-ones more personable, and at least touch on emotional well-being. I again felt this is not just a nice to have. My hypothesis was that this would lead to higher individual satisfaction. People feel supported, they want to do more, they perform better, they grow better, and then your company can actually retain these people, who are putting in so much of their time and effort into your company. You can retain them better.
Yeah.
So we ended up finding a lot of clear signal from these focus groups that this would go a long way. It doesn't have to dominate the conversation, but every 2 to 3 weeks, if a manager asks about somebody's emotional well-being in a well-framed question, a well-framed conversation starter, that goes such a long way. And so we incorporated that as one of the key component in our model, which created these conversational starters. Ultimately, I think I feel passionately about inclusive workspaces, and being able to drive those long-term cultural shifts within organizations. And I feel like being a woman really helped me see that in a clearer light. I don't want to speak for anyone else, but just share my personal experience with this one example.
Yeah, and that's a project that you worked on or as part of your job. That was right. But it's also a great takeaway for anybody listening today, or for just organizations in general, to foster a more inclusive environment and to make people feel heard and valued and validated, and then stay longer and ultimately, I guess, be a more productive employee. So that's an excellent takeaway to sort of foster the environment that we're all striving for. How else do you think organizations, you said this is something important to you, how else do you think that organizations can create this more inclusive environment for women in AI specifically?
Yeah, that's a really difficult question. I think all organizations are trying different ways to do that. To me, it really starts with attracting women towards more technical roles. And I know organizations have certain control over it, but a lot of it starts from the grassroots, in terms of helping more and more women get into tech-focused careers and roles and education in the first place. I know a lot of organizations have, a budget to really spend on social responsibility and social good. And that's where I would really encourage to like earmark some of the budget to support women in tech, because the more diverse the pipe is at the top, the higher the chances that more people will be successful and then be the role model for other people. In more tangible terms, when I think about 3 levels of effort that organizations could do, it's attract, provide mentoring once you have people in, and then support. With attracting people and attracting women into AI, targeted outreach is, I think, really important to ensure that, in the top of the funnel, you've got candidates. And I think in addition to outreach itself, it's also about creating inclusive hiring practices that encourage women to apply. I shared in my previous example, I feel I'm generalizing again, but women put a lot more burden on, looking at a job description. Women will apply if like 90%, if there's a 90% overlap. Men will apply, research has shown, if they've got a much lower percentage of overlap with their skills. And so small little things like, hey, you don't have to check all the boxes. Adding things like that on a job description encourage more women to apply, because it is for some reason, very, very normal for women to put a higher bar for themselves when it comes to skills. And do I meet the requirements for this role? In terms of targeted outreach, there's many organizations that, like Women in AI, Girls Who Code, Women in Machine Learning, there's a long list. At one of my former companies, we actually had a recruiting program focused on universities and organizations like this to get, a more diverse pipe at the top. But you have to support that with inclusive hiring practices and ways in which you're not deterring women to apply. The second thing that I think is really important is mentoring. There are organizations where women join, and then you'll see a high attrition rate within those organizations specifically for women employees. So women aren't sticking around, right? And there's multiple reasons. They're sometimes not getting enough mentoring or not getting enough support. So what organizations can do is have formal programs to help women grow and navigate in their career challenges. It's very normal for a woman in AI to be the only woman in a team. And that's lonely, right? The way organizations can do this, I mean, you can't suddenly have another woman on the team if there isn't one, but the least that organizations can do is pair these women in AI with more senior women who've gone through all the troubles that they might be facing in their career right now. And then also, I think the third thing I would say is offering more support. And support goes beyond flexible work arrangements so that you can manage your home and work. It goes beyond that. It's about ensuring that women have access to high impact projects. You get the chance to prove yourself. And then once that happens, you work on one high impact project. And I had leaders and managers in my career who took that chance on me. And I went above and beyond. And that just kickstarted that positive cycle where it's like you get such a big boost in your confidence as a woman in tech. And then you're like, yeah, I can do this. I can do this just as well as anyone else. And then you start, raising your hand more and more for more difficult things that others might not be raising their hands for. And that naturally will lead you to higher responsibilities, higher role scopes and leadership opportunities. So I think those are some of the things that I think organizations can do, but it's also a lot on us as women to ask for these things, from the organizations and like hold them accountable to, hey, if you're taking a chance on me, I'm also taking a chance on you for my career.
Yeah, definitely. I love that. Just, raise your hand for more things. And then soon you won't have to raise your hand. People will come to you for things. And you get out of this sort of mentality of feeling like you have to prove yourself. You're proven and people will come to you.
Yeah.
I like that.
Totally.
Okay, last question for you, and then we can move to Q&A because we have a bunch of questions from folks coming in. So last question is, what are some common misconceptions about AI that you'd like to debunk?
Oh gosh, there are so many. I actually want to focus on misconceptions that specifically make people a little bit wary of AI in education and upskilling, right? Education was education, schools, colleges were was the first industry to say, hey, what's happening? This is not what we want. AI is not what we want. And I want to debunk some of those misconceptions. The first one is that AI is a tool to bypass learning by cheating. That's the first one. That's the first response that educators had. I want to push our thinking and say that if we're choosing the right tools, AI can actually turbocharge learning and provide more personalized learning experience and really make it feel like every user has their own personal mentor, right? the way these AI tools are developed and chosen, if you choose tools that don't spoon feed answers, but actually push learners' thinking through challenging concepts, that can actually help them to build their knowledge incrementally and at their own pace, versus, having to be in one classroom where there's one instructor. And so they have to, everyone has to default to that average pace of learning, right? Another thing is that AI can actually prevent cheating by personalizing the path for every learner. So as an example, take Workera's example. Our AI assessments, they actually create case studies that reflect your role, your company, and your industry. It's really hard to cheat when everyone's questions are different. Like, you can't memorize anything. So that's one simple way in which it can actually help. It does come down to choosing the right tool that has been designed the right way to actually turbocharge learning. There will be some players that will do the former, but it's not something that can be broadly said about AI, that it's a tool to bypass learning. It all comes down to choosing the right tool for the users and for the learners. The second one that often comes up is that AI eliminates the need for effort. It's like you don't need to work too hard. You can just put stuff in AI and like a, magic pill, it's going to give you the answers. But a lot of times those answers are not good. So I would want to debunk that by saying you still need human creativity, critical thinking. You can think about AI as a way that helps you brainstorm, but the human discernment and judgment that you build from, being in the world, being in your role for years cannot be replaced by AI. Instead, I think if one can use AI as a personal trainer, so like think on your own and use AI to judge your thinking and push your thinking. And as a soundboard, it does wonders. It's not great at answering. It's really great at critiquing your answers. So that's what I would recommend people use AI for. It can push your thinking and it can actually help you develop better critical thinking, better problem-solving skills, and ultimately better skills the more you use AI in that way. And I think the last one that I want to call out is that AI in education will lead to job losses. I think of this in two levels, and I want to debunk this at two levels: job losses today and in the future. And I think neither of them are true. The empathy and care that comes from a human educator, especially as we think of like K through 12 younger students that cannot be replaced by AI. Instead, AI can really be your co-pilot as a teacher or as an instructor to know every kid, know every student and meet them where they are. You still need to do the work and the effort to understand every student. AI can make it easier. If you fast forward to the future, I think AI actually prepares students for a future workforce. Think about a student who's trained to use AI tools effectively versus those who are not. The first set is going to be much more competitive, right? And so the more we expose students and our future workforce to AI within controlled bounds, making sure that number one and number two that I talked about, those misconceptions were taken care of by choosing the right tools and creating the right environment. I think we're ultimately creating the workforce of the future, because these are skills that they're going to have to pick up at some point, and sooner is better.
Completely agree. That was great. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to shift into the Q&A portion of today's session. So first question for you. We often get pressured from leadership, as an example, or from other stakeholders to just like inject more AI into the product or build something AI without like the most concern for why, or is AI actually the right solution here. So how, as a product person at an AI company, how do you balance the desire or the push to integrate AI into a solution with the genuine need for AI as a solution in that case?
Yeah. I think this is the classic case of tech first thinking. Is like, we've got this really cool tech that is almost like magic. What can we do with it? And I think it is a cool piece of tech. I mean, when it came out, people were really wowed. I was wowed. I remember when ChatGPT first came out, November of 2022. And it does start that thinking of, oh, wow, this can do so much. This can do everything, right? But what I'd encourage teams that are building solutions to do is really take a step back, look at AI just in terms of what's feasible, but then go back to the user problems, the customer problems that you're trying to solve. Diverge on possible solutions. AI could be one of those solutions, but it shouldn't be the first thing that we jump into. This is what I've also like almost asked all of my product teams to do when writing pitches, is like, think of the problem deeply and then think of multiple potential solutions, diverge before we converge first. And when you diverge on multiple solutions, which could be, hey, we could actually do this using a rule-based software, all the way to we could use an LLM to basically not have to write software, just throw all the things in and give it the rules, and it can make the decisions on its own. That's the other end of the spectrum. There's trade-offs on both sides. The more deeply you can think of trade-offs on, for this particular problem, what is the right balance across the two? The higher your chances that you're not force-fitting tech to a problem, force-fitting a solution to a problem. Ultimately, I think it comes down to what's the user need and the problem that you're trying to solve.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, makes sense. Okay, next question for you. As a woman in technology, I would like to understand how to start learning AI. Where do I start?
Yeah. A lot of my guidance would typically depend on who I'm talking to and what role we're talking about, but I can share some more general advice on what are some of the key ingredients that I think are important to being successful in an AI role. And I'm thinking like AI is something that enters, all different fields. But when I say position, my interpretation of position in AI is you want to build products using AI. It could be a product manager or software engineer or a product designer. So that's where I'm focusing my answer on. I think there's 3 key ingredients here. One is strengthen your basic tech foundations, right? A strong foundation in STEM is valuable. So, having a good STEM foundation is important, but don't stop at learning Python or TensorFlow. Find real world problems that you can solve, right? Apply your skills in meaningful projects. You can go to, existing repos. You can go to Kaggle to get these projects and ideas for data models that you can use and things, small little projects that you can do. And that confidence that comes from practical experience is invaluable. It's hard to replace that by taking a course. Yes, courses can be helpful in helping you understand or put things into perspective, but those alone won't get you very far. The course that I always recommend to someone who's trying to dip their toes into this is AI for Everyone by Andrew Ng. But I think a lot of the confidence comes from applying the skills, even using ChatGPT in your daily life or Claude or Perplexity, whatever is your AI tool of choice, is one of the best ways to understand generative AI's potential. Experiment with it in your everyday life. you know. It will help you push the boundaries to see what AI can and cannot do. And that hands-on approach, it builds your skills, but also helps you uncover new applications. A lot of businesses and products have started because, you know, there was a very acute problem that somebody figured out how to solve, and then they could scale it. And the third thing I would say is stay curious and keep learning, right? Take a lot of courses, jump into snippets that you can. What I also like to do is follow thought leaders on LinkedIn so that my feed becomes much more relevant to AI things. Sign up for AI newsletters, and don't be afraid to dive into new topics. In learning about AI, actually, AI is your best tool. So if you don't understand something, ask ChatGPT. I feel like in my own career, staying curious really helped me push boundaries. Ultimately, I think if you look at, you know, people who are trying to enter the field of AI or generative AI products, a lot of us are greenfield because the field itself is so new. It's actually a great equalizer for anyone who wants to enter it. So don't let anything scare you. Is I think my key takeaway here is don't let AI scare you. It's new for everyone. Put in the time and effort, and it's much easier to jump into than you would believe.
I like that. Also, you mentioned populating your Twitter feed with folks who are saying things that are relevant to you, and following newsletters, subscribing to newsletters as a way to stay up to date with the latest trends in tech. So that's helpful, a helpful tip as well. You talked a lot about the importance of mentorship, specifically for women. Do you know of any communities where women, there's sort of like a shared dialogue around AI technology, product, where just for women?
Yeah.
And then maybe a sub question to that one is, are there do any of those communities surface job opportunities? Where would one find job opportunities in this space?
Yeah, I know of bigger organizations like Girls Who Code. There is one actually called Women in AI that you can look up as well. Um, and then there was another one that I came across recently, Women in Machine Learning. That's another organization. I know some of those do job postings as well. So yeah, those would be my three to start with.
Okay, very helpful. All right. Last question for you and how we close out all of these webinars. In a sentence or two, or as briefly as possible, what advice would you give to young women aspiring to have a career in AI?
Yeah. I would say a couple of things. Also reiterate some of the tips that I shared earlier. Join these organizations to find like-minded people like you. Two, if you have a STEM background or you don't have a STEM background, don't worry. If you don't have a STEM background, try to get into basics of math for AI and data science for AI. Some of those are prerequisites for building a career in AI. So I'd say take some of those foundational courses. You don't have to be an engineer to have all the STEM background that you need. It's actually much easier now. And three, I would say, is experiment with AI. Use as many AI tools as you can to really build an understanding for what AI can do and cannot do. Those would be, I think, my three big tips.
Awesome. That's great. Well, thank you so much, Saumya, for joining us today, and for everyone else who tuned in to the webinar. We both hope that you found the conversation as valuable as we did. Be sure to stay tuned for future installments of the Women in AI webinar series. And please follow Saumya to stay up to date on all of the incredible work she is doing in AI. So thank you all again, and we will see you next time.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Victoria.